walking down the street.
I do want to say to Doni and many of you in this room that over a very long career in this city, all of you have helped me and my colleagues tell the truth and to try to tell.
I may not look like you and you me, but
Take my hat off.
I'm from South Carolina, so I just...
What does this event mean to you, Miss Peggy Morris?
Oh, my heart,
Happy 20th anniversary.
my heart is about loving up on my sisters. Do you know what it feels like to have your sisters in the room? John.
And dare to be different and unique. I'm gonna be the best me I can be by letting His glory shine through. I am beautiful, I am blessed, but not just what you see in the flesh. I'm free from people, free from myself. There's a
The doctor lived next door to the janitor to the reverend, and the lawyer. We were together. Now we get so high and mighty that you create stress for your society because you don't like poor black folks either. That's a health problem. Get yourself together so I can stop being taking care of geriatric people and get back to pediatrics. I thank you, Doni, for all you've done. Let's keep doing it for all the more.
letting His glory shine through. Dare to be you, dare to be me, dare to be different and unique. I'm gonna be the best me I can be by letting His glory shine through. And I dare you, I dare you, I dare you to be you,
Maybe. Okay. I'd like to welcome you to the show. My name is Donnie Glover, and we're having some challenges getting our guests in, but we're going to start off with prayer. I'd like to start the week off right. Gracious Lord, make us truly thankful for this day. Bless this show. Bless us to touch someone, to help inspire someone, to help empower someone. And we promise, Lord, to give you all the praise and all the glory in your name. Amen. So, oh, there we go.
Donnie, all right. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm well.
Man, I like that tie.
Oh, thank you, man. Shucks. I got it on just for you, brother. Just for you. I was in sweatpants.
So, how have you been?
I've been well, busy but good. Are we recording yet?
We are live.
Oh,
welcome
gosh,
to the show.
Good to be on, man. It's good to be really with you, especially as we start a new month. And so many things, so much exciting news is going on. So to be able to be on the show with you, man, this morning is truly an honor.
Well, I have to ask you this. Any thoughts on Friday and Saturday, 103 years since the destruction of Tulsa's Black Wall Street?
Yeah, I appreciate being on your show this morning. You know, we have a women's business center in Tulsa, the US Black Chamber. We've had it now for a few years. It's really an irony that's going on in that city. You know, I've been there now a few times, and when you talk to the local residents, talk to the people that have moved to Tulsa from outside the state, it's a low percentage of people that actually know about the history of their own community. People that live there weren't taught about the massacre. People that have relocated there say, yeah, well, you know, I think we had some kind of issue here back in the 70s, didn't we? And I'm like, no, you know, you're talking real history there. But just not enough of the local citizens understand what happened in Tulsa. And to be able to be on this morning to talk about, you know, 103 years later, is truly the kinds of conversations that we need to have, because it's not being taught in the school systems, particularly those that are there in the local community of Tulsa. Tulsa was a great city. It showed America that we can do for ourselves when given the opportunity. And it only took a few Black people to have a vision to be able to start the city, and the rest of the city's population moved there because of the opportunity and the growth. And I think, in the future, you'll be able to see other cities like Tulsa come around in America. Tulsa was just one of 50 Black towns around the country, 20 of them being in the state of Oklahoma, because of, the segregation that was going on around the country. Folk thought that, hey, we could do better by ourselves, working with one another to make sure that we have an economic agenda. And so hopefully you'll see cities like Tulsa, or at least the initiatives to be able to support each other through economics and through Black business. There's a resurgence of that around the country.
Speaking of vision, is it 14 years now that the
15 years this past March 2009. 15. Yeah.
Wow. How does that feel?
Donnie, I think it's one of those situations where I was listening to a poem this past weekend, and really, when you're called into your own vision, sometimes you don't really know what the outcome of that's going to be, what the future of that's going to be. But when you're called to do something, you jump in with both feet, with the full commitment, and you work to see what's going to happen, without knowing about the profitability of a vision, the diligence that it's going to take to get that vision implemented. You do things with faith. And 15 years later now, man, Donnie, we have 172 Black chambers around the country with over 300,000 members. And if you'd told me or asked me 15 years ago, did I see this happening? I did not have that in my own sights, but I knew that there was a need. I knew that there was an opportunity, and I just raised my hand and said, how can I participate and how can I lead? And so just truly an honor to be here 15 years later, especially in a community like Washington, D.C., where there's so much going on, so much opportunity. And so U.S. Black Chambers has created a voice and a lane for itself to be here for Black-owned businesses.
I got a pointed question to ask you. We now have President Biden seeking re-election. How was it operating the chamber under the previous administration?
We came here under the administration of Barack Obama, the first Black president. And Donnie, that's when you and I first met. Had the opportunity to have you at the White House with us early on in our existence. And I really believe that at the time there was this, just resurgence going around the country of a Black agenda. For so often, and you'll hear me say this, most of the programs that are being created were created around minority. And I've always stated that I'm not a minority. I'm a Black man, and there are different issues and needs for Black men and Black business owners versus those of any other ethnic group. And when you talk about minority participation, sometimes we get left off. We asked then Vice President Biden to be three things: intentional, transparent, and accountable. And it's ironic that we're having this conversation this morning about Tulsa, because before we endorsed him and backed him, we said, hey, we wanted to know about what was being done in reference to the Black business community. And he traveled to Tulsa, Oklahoma, went to our facility in front of the birthplace of Black Wall Street, where the monument is. And for the first time in this country's history, he disaggregated the numbers. And what we heard was, of the $960 billion that this country spends each year on products and services, that the Asian community was receiving roughly 1.8% of the spend. The Hispanic community was receiving approximately 1.71% of the minority spend. and the Black business community was receiving 1.5% of the minority spend. And so I've always said the minority conversation has not helped the Black business community at all. And so you say, well, who's receiving all this minority spend? And it is white women that have benefited the most. They receive roughly 78% of all of the minority spend. And so even when you hear the president of the United States saying, hey, I want to increase the minority spend from 11% to 15%, we as a people have to be smarter than that and say, okay, well, what does that really mean to me? What does that really mean to my community? What does that mean to my business? And so the U.S. Black Chamber has been very intentional about the conversations that we're having, about the advocacy that we're doing, because we are more concerned about what's happening in the Black business community than the minority business community. So you asked the question about, well, how has it differed between the Biden administration and the Trump administration? You also have to understand that while Trump was president, we had COVID-19, so that was a big tragedy, and the murder of George Floyd. And so although the administration slowed down its spend with Black firms, it really destructed most of the Black and minority initiatives. It was corporate America that had stepped in and understood what minority and Black businesses needed. And so although it was a very difficult time to work with the administration, corporate America understood that there needs to be a thriving minority community for America to be strong as well.
Who else is advocating for Black business?
You know, Donnie, I try to keep my head down and do my job. I know that when we talk to the CBC members, we had meetings with Hakeem Jeffries, Congressman Horsford, and even Yvette Clarke just last week. They understand the need and the advocacy and the support that Black business owners that they have. They're Black business owners themselves. Many of them come from Black communities, and so they definitely get it. And I think you'll even hear the Vice President of the United States going around now doing her economic tour for Black America, and she's having intentional conversations about what this administration has done for Black-owned businesses. And I will say that for the first time, we're really hearing a conversation about an economic agenda for Black businesses. We were with her in Atlanta, where she kicked the tour off. Then she went to Detroit, where I had the opportunity to introduce her. And then after that, she was in Milwaukee just 2 weeks ago. And then last week, she and the president were in Philadelphia having a conversation with Black America. So I think this administration truly understands that it is going to be Black America that once again saves democracy, because we're not seeing a lot of the guardrails that have been created to keep America in a progressive and diverse conversation being under attack. I do believe that when you have folk like the Vice President that understand that, hey, in order for there to be a great America, there's got to be a great Black America. And in order for there to be a great Black America, there's got to be great Black businesses. And so the U.S. Black Chamber is here to ensure that we do have all the resources and at least the conversation about making sure that Black businesses have what they need to ensure long-term sustainability.
Here in the state of Maryland, we have an African-American woman who's running for U.S. Senate, Angela Alsobrooks. As a Marylander, what should I be looking to hear from Prince George's County Executive Angela Alsobrooks? And what should other Marylanders hope to hear from her? This is a 30% Black state. Minority business enterprise has been a term that has been referenced over the years. It's not something that I hear a lot about these days, although, you know, I constantly push it here on this network. What should we be looking to hear from an Angela Alsobrooks, hopefully?
Well, you know, we try as an organization to stay as neutral as possible when it comes to local politics, because we represent so many different districts and states, as well as races. But Angela has shown her ability to be able to lead. And again, when we're asking candidates and we're talking to candidates and asking individuals about what they should be looking for from candidates, again, we talk about the three things. The intentionality, we want to know exactly what she's going to do for Black homeowners, Black businesses, and Black voters. We want to know the transparency. So we want to know what's behind the conversation. Where are the numbers? Where is the data? Where is she starting, and what is her goals to really be able to improve the conditions that are happening here in the state of Maryland? And lastly, the accountability. After you say these things, you make these commitments, and you even just disaggregate the spending of the state. We want to know what's going to happen if those promises aren't kept. More importantly, how can we as citizens and business owners, as advocates, help to make sure that they happen? But if not, we've got to make sure that we're going to be holding candidates, including Angela, accountable for making sure that Maryland is the best state in the country.
Going back to the Obama administration, there was Kevin Lewis. Since then, there's been Erica Lowe and currently Roderica Applewhite. Any thoughts on why it's important to have Black people in those positions reaching out to Black media?
Yeah, the U.S. Black Chamber partnered with the National Association of Black-owned Broadcasters last year. We took over that organization because we understood the importance of good conversation, good media. When COVID happened, we lost 42% of all Black-owned businesses, 41%. That represented 442,000 Black businesses closed between the months of February and April of 2020. And when we surveyed them, the majority of them said that they went out of business, not because of lack of acumen or in the wrong business, or even for that matter, lack of capital. It was lack of information. We just did not know where and what we should be doing as a community, because we were getting information from untrusted sources. We were getting information late. We were getting information that was inaccurate. And so we feel like having direct communications from trusted Black media sources to Black communities and Black business owners and just Black listeners and consumers is extremely important. And to be able to get that information directly from a Black source at the White House is very important. And we've seen it in these last 2-3 administrations that are being led by Democrats. And it is changing the trajectory of how Black people respond. I think what's important now, Doni, is to make sure that the messaging from this administration is getting to the listeners and the potential voters around the country, because this administration has done some marvelous things for Black communities, Black businesses, Black students, Black homeowners, but it's just not reaching the voters, potential voters, about what's happening. And so it is going to be even that much more important going forward between now and the end of the year to be able to tell some of the positive news that's happening here in Washington, D.C. as it relates to Black businesses and Black consumers.
What focus do we have on the next generation?
That's a really interesting question. We started this talking about the massacre of Tulsa and the lack of information that is being shared with not just the generation in here, but the generation coming behind us. There's so much information that's out here via internet, via Google, even via AI, but we've got too much information coming to young people. They're being inundated, and it's constantly changing. In our world, when you and I were coming up, you could trust your teachers, you could trust the sources that you were getting information from, because it was relatively limited. Now, much of that information was being tainted or not being told to us or being given to us by individuals that didn't necessarily always have our best interests at hand. Now there's information for young people to be able to find out by themselves. But for a young person, it's difficult many times to be able to have the interest to be able to go out and do the due diligence about their own communities and about their own history. So it's going to be left up to individuals like yourself and me and others to make sure that we're passing on the information that was important to you and I, to make sure that we're making good decisions, as well as making sure that we have the consistency of information being shared to the generation that comes behind them. What we have seen is, as information is being watered down or whitewashed, we're losing much of the pride that we've had in our communities. You'll see that, many Black people were talking about, and I don't want to get into a whole lot of politics, but, hey man, we got to remove the Robert E. Lee statues. And I've always felt just the opposite. I've always wanted the statues to be in existence so that we would never forget their history. Because once you start dealing with other people's history, then that's when they want to remove your history. So the days that we had in Southern Virginia and Charleston, when we were talking about the Jews would not replace us, I was more upset about the fact that we lost the only Black-owned bank in the state of Virginia. So I say many times we get caught up in other people's fights and other people's history, and we're not talking about our future. I'm more interested in where will Black people have the opportunity to continue to bank with Black-owned banks than about a Robert E. Lee statue. I want my children and potential grandchildren in the future to never forget about the history that white people had. And by removing statues and monuments of the sort, they can change their history and think that they were always good people. And you and I know better because we've seen it, we've lived it. And I think it's important to be able to also share that information with the generations that are coming behind us so that they can continue to make the strides and the steps to move our communities forward.
One piece of history that you have shared with me over the years that I've never forgotten is about Dallas having the first Black chamber. Tell me about that.
Yeah, in Dallas, Texas, in 1926, the Dallas Black Chamber was started because of many of the challenges that were being forced on cities like Tulsa, Oklahoma, around the country. We could not find places to spend our money. We couldn't find places that were going to support us. Segregation was terrible. And so the economic thought leaders in the city of Dallas created a Black Chamber of Commerce because they could not be included in the majority chamber or the Dallas Chamber of Commerce. And so the Dallas Black Chamber was created, and it is still in existence today. Matter of fact, their previous president is now the chamber chairman of the board, Mr. Charles O'Neill, who's now the president of the Texas African American Chamber of Commerce. And so we're very proud to have them as one of our members. And you're going to need strong advocates in local communities and local states. As you know, Texas is one of the states that are going through a major turmoil as it relates to politics and some of the legislation that's being created from the education system all the way across the board. And so it's very important that we have chambers of commerce that are there that understand what it is business owners need, particularly Black-owned businesses.
What is your why, Ron?
I'll give this story. I remember when I first came to Washington, D.C. In March, right after the election of President Obama. And I remember taking a double-decker bus tour, and it was cold, snow on the ground still. And I looked out at the license plates of Washington, D.C., Doni, and you know this as well. It says taxation
without representation.
And I thought to myself, that's who Black people are. We have been paying into systems. We have been paying taxes. We vote. Heck, Doni, we even pay tithes. But yet we've not had anyone that has been there representing our voices, representing our concerns. And so my why is really there to be created to make sure that as successful as we are as business owners, as hard as we work, as much as we pay taxes, you've got to have somebody there that's going to carry that voice on forward for you. Many times we do all the right things and still don't have anybody fighting for us. We've had great leaders coming from Baltimore that have been big heroes of mine. My father was in the Black Panther Party, so he always stressed upon us that your voice is extremely important to make sure that you're representing the community in which you live for. So my why is to make sure that my father's message does not go without being unheard.
You alluded to the church. What role does the Black church play in our trajectory when it comes to Black business? We have what, $1.6 trillion in annual disposable income, the equivalent of maybe the 16th largest economy on earth.
You know, I was blessed to grow up in Oakland, and I had a mother that was a teacher and a minister. So I say I'm well educated, went to 2 HBCUs, and I also know my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. But I also had a father, and my father was a business owner as well as a member of the Black Panther Party. So I'm about business, and I don't take no shit. I think that the church plays a role, and it's a great role. I mean, it taught me how to be a leader, but it also taught me how to be a servant. I think it's a message that's there of hope and how to work in organizations. It is just a community in itself, and it gives people the opportunity to grow and understand how to work within organizations. I think the message is there in that we live for a greater cause. And I think the church, from an economic standpoint, when we first began, I was involved in a group called Black Wealth 2020, where we had 3 initiatives. The first one was we wanted to increase the number of Black homeowners. And we worked that through the church. We wanted to get to 5 million Black homeowners because we understood that home ownership was one of the fastest ways to be able to create generational wealth. The second goal was we wanted to double the number of Black-owned businesses. Again, we worked through the Black church to get that message out. But not only did we want to double the number of Black-owned businesses, but we wanted to double the annual revenue of those firms. At the time, the annualized revenue for a Black firm was roughly $75,000. The goal was to get that to $150,000, and we were on track right before COVID happened. And the third one was to increase the number of Blacks that had bank accounts with Black-owned banks. The Black church gives you the opportunity to have conversations with Black citizens, Black business owners, Black consumers, each and every week on a consistent basis. But the challenge is Black churches, as you stated, create a lot of wealth on Sunday morning, and many times they deposit those dollars into white-owned banks where they can't even go themselves and take out a loan to purchase a building or to create a program. And so we've talked to Black churches about making sure that they are looking at potential deposits in Black-owned banks. But Black churches are very important from an economic standpoint, from a political standpoint, as well as a way in which we can move our communities and agenda forward by just having the pulpit to be able to talk to folk every week.
How can we get the church better involved?
You know, that has been a challenge for years. And I think we've got to make sure that now people are still going back to church. I think after COVID and many of the churches went online, we've lost a lot of those folks that have not come back to the house of the Lord. They're getting the message, but many times it's via internet or TV evangelists. And I think you lose a little bit of that connectivity, that spirituality. And so I think we got to start by making sure that folk are going back to the church house. But I also think that churches have the responsibility of being more involved in their local communities and economic conversations in those local communities, because they can do so much. Churches have buildings that are there, and many of them aren't being used, but possibly on Friday evenings or Wednesday nights for Bible study, and then Sunday mornings. Those buildings could be used for many times small business owners need a place to be able to showcase their products and services. Why not at those churches? I just think that the church has the opportunity to bring us all together, to be able to share a good message, as well as being able to support the economic businesses for many of those church members in their congregation as well as their communities.
Tell me about the Black businesswoman. I was having a conversation with a group online, and it was brought to my attention. Silly me. I thought that Black women were doing better than anyone in our community, but it's I'm not sure. I am hearing that Black men actually fare better in the realm of business. What's the reality?
The reality is that Black women are opening businesses at the highest rate.
Okay.
They're growing businesses, they're opening businesses. But Doni, you have to understand that many of those women were forced to open up businesses. During COVID, they were, in many cases, the first to get fired or laid off. Many of them needed the flexibility now of being able to manage households because their children were forced now to stay home. Husbands were forced to stay home. And so women needed the flexibility of being able to be able to create an income while still managing their families. And so women have always been entrepreneurial. They've always been able to, even back in the day, bake pies and cakes and sell those, do the alterations, do hair and makeup. And I think women have now seen that, hey, they could go out and do this for themselves. But I would much rather women be able to stay home, raise families, create the kind of infrastructure that we still need in the family environment. So to ask the question, I think sometimes we have now created this division between men and women. And I think what has happened is the Black voice has been limited to some degree because now you have a women's movement and a women's voice and a men's voice and a men's movement, as opposed to it just being a Black conversation. It's a Black woman conversation or it's a Black men conversation. And now you have Black men and women competing against each other as opposed to supporting and collaborating with each other. And so I don't really look and saying, okay, well, Black women are doing great, Black men are doing great. Black businesses have challenges. We've got to look at us collectively. I want you to understand this. Black women spend doesn't get counted in the federal government as a woman spend. There's not enough Black spend in general for them to segregate. This is how much goes to Black men versus Black women. It's collectively 1.5%. So all of us together still aren't doing much work with the federal government. And if we're not doing much work with the federal government, it's probably even half of that with the private sector. And so as much as we say, well, Black women are opening up businesses, we've got to make sure that we're looking at the transparency of what does that really mean in reference to annualized revenue. How many employees are they hiring? How much taxes are they creating? And those numbers we don't have yet.
Earlier in the conversation, you spoke about, I want to touch on minority business enterprise. I agree with you. I'm a Black man. I don't consider myself anybody's minority. I have a passport. I've traveled. I've seen that people of color are more all across the world.
Mm-hmm.
Nonetheless, if you're going to get contracts with the city of Baltimore, and I'm just coming from a Baltimore-centric perspective, if you're going to get contracts with the state of Maryland or even the federal 8A program, there's this certification process, whether it's the 8A or state MBE or city MBE. A lot of paperwork. Some people pay people to get them certified, what have you. And then after you get the certification, that just opens the door and allows you to enter into the competition. You still have to navigate in order to get contracts. Your thoughts on minority business enterprise and certification?
Well, I'm a former business owner. I'm a graduate of the 8A program. So I've gone through the process. I didn't pay anybody to fill out my paperwork. But again, this was back in the early 90s, late 80s. And I say a couple of things. One, I think it should be difficult. It should be very difficult to get into the program. Because once you get into the program, as difficult as it is, it can change your life. I was a very successful business owner before getting into the 8A program, and I was bidding on jobs in the thousands of dollars, sometimes in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. The day I became 8A certified, I was bidding on jobs in the millions of dollars. If you aren't prepared, if you don't know your business, the program is only 9 years. Many businesses get into it because they hear about the opportunity. They are in it the first few years trying to figure out how to navigate. And before you know it, it's time for them to exit the program. And so I say spend the time to go through the process of filling out all the paperwork yourself. It will make you understand your business. It will make you understand the process of doing work with the government. And now you won't be leaning on someone else, a third party that you paid thousands of dollars to fill out your paperwork to now figure out, well, how are you going to implement and use this certification process? I would also say that it's not for everyone. There are certain NAICS codes, or for some folks, six codes, that do better than others. But let's change the conversation. Right now, today, the CHIPS Act has $81 billion of opportunity, and no one is talking about that. The 8A program, yes, has great opportunities. Many of the programs and opportunities from the cities and states are great, but $81 billion is a lot of money. We've got to be more intentional of where we go fish. I'd much rather fish in the ocean, deep sea, than in a local pond where the fish only have the opportunity to grow so large. And the CHIPS Act is one of those. Before last year, we were talking about the infrastructure bill. There was a lot of money being spent there as well. Challenges are down in many of our firms are just too small. When we talk to both corporate America as well as the federal government, they say, Ron, we do more business with Black folk if we could, one, find them. And we'll talk a little bit about how businesses now can be found. And the second one is they don't have the size and the scale. The average Black-owned business is doing less than $200,000 a year. And many of these large contracts are sometimes $200 million a year. And so it's unrealistic for the federal government to say, okay, well, yeah, we're going to give you an opportunity to compete for this $200 million opportunity when we know we've seen you do business. Let's say you're a $2 million firm. And so we're telling firms, hey, let's look at mergers. Let's look at joint ventures, consortiums, and where it makes sense. I know you're there in Baltimore, so you know about Reginald Lewis, who did acquisitions. I got to a certain size in my own firm after being 8A certified and realized that I still wasn't large enough to compete for some of the large opportunities that I was looking for. And so I spent 6 months looking to acquire a firm and ended up buying a firm that doubled my size once again. And so I think many of our business owners have to think outside the box, have to look at mergers and acquisitions as a part of their strategy to be able to compete for some of the contracts that are coming into play today.
Wow. Tell me more about this CHIPS Act. I've never heard of it.
Oh, gosh. The CHIPS Act is just what it is. It's all about developing the new chips for all these computers that we see running around the country. And President Biden said, hey, he was creating a Made in America initiative. Most of the chips that we were buying historically were coming from overseas, China, Japan. And so we're saying we're going to manufacture them here in America. You'll see communities in Texas and Kansas that are opening, building huge infrastructures, hiring hundreds of new individuals to come and work in these facilities, but they are all going to be spending money on subcontractors, and it is our opportunity to now get into play to be able to compete successfully for those contracts. But many of those have not been released. And so what the U.S. Black Chamber is doing is that we're asking for twofold on the existing contracts that are already in play. Those that are coming up during the fourth quarter of 2024, first quarter of 2025, we're asking for transparency. Let us know when those contracts are coming up. How much did you spend on those contracts? Who did you award those contracts to? And if you can't find those Black firms that you say, then let us go find them. And if they don't exist, we'll come back and say, hey, there's not a Black firm that can do that. Now it's going to be left up to us to go and create those firms, do mergers, acquisitions, put 3 or 4 firms together to be able to create the size of the firms that they need. But we've got to do more than just say, okay, well, we tried, it didn't happen, and so let's use that as an excuse. The U.S. Black Chamber is saying we're not going to go for the old excuses that were created before in reference to not being able to find Black firms. And what we're doing now is we created our own certification platform. You said, hey, many of these firms are out having to spend thousands of dollars to get certified. And it is true. But even more than that, many of the certification programs are extremely discriminatory, i.e., you've got to go find a birth certificate of both your mother and father that either say Negro and or colored on their birth certificate, depending upon the year that they were born. And in today's environment, it's very difficult for you to be able to find, in many cases, both mother and father. They may have been divorced or deceased, or you may not even know them or being able to contact them. And so the U.S. Black Chamber is saying, hey, we've created our own certification process. It's now close to 4 years old. We have over 30,000 businesses that have been through the process. And most importantly, Doni, it's free of charge. We don't feel like the Black business owner should have to spend money to be able to show me that he is a Black firm.
Because when I ride down North Avenue and they pull me over, it's no question I'm Black.
Exactly.
And I think certification ought to be as simple.
It should be I mean, there should be things that we need to make sure, but I'm not as concerned about your profitability. Your profitability doesn't showcase the fact that you're Black or not. I can see that from a driver's license. I can see that from the ownership documentation. And so we've removed some of the stigma of being a Black firm from you. But there are things that I'm going to ask you virtually that many Black business owners will have different answers to many white business owners. I'm going to ask you, did you ever see Roots? When did you see it and what was your experience? There are certain things that we need to know from you that will showcase, in fact, of the matter if you really are an African American or a Black person.
Ron, when you think about the history of racism in this country, and you alluded to Roots, I think that was 1979 for some reason. Maybe it was.
No, it was before then. It was like 1973.
73.
Yeah.
And you think about where we are today. I guess this is more of a rhetorical. Racism is just so stupid. Everybody makes money when we act like we have some common sense. Racists miss out on business, but yet we're worried about overseas. I don't. Have you figured it out?
When you get the answer to that, let me know, man. That is the $10 million question. I think it will change the trajectory of the Black community. I think in many cases, you know, there are issues that are worldly, that are important to the United States, but I think there are issues that are important to Black America that are more important than anything that's going on anywhere else in the country or the world. I think we've got to be, again, intentional about the conversations that we're having. We got to be transparent about what it really means to you, to your family, to your community, and then we got to be accountable. We've got to make sure that we're holding elected officials, we're holding policymakers, and we're holding just decision makers accountable about the decisions that they're making that impact our lives.
This segment is being brought to you by STEMCityUSA.com. Ron, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dr. Tyrone Taborn, but he's our fearless leader who is involved in the metaverse. He's one of the largest Black publishers in the United States. He created Black Engineer Magazine, Hispanic Engineer Magazine, and now STEM City USA, where we're actually in the metaverse. With that backdrop, where is AI going?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. You know, if you had asked me 2 months ago about AI, I remember doing a little bit of due diligence about Black excellence, because that was a term that was being used. And when you said to AI, Black excellence, Donnie, the only thing that would come up was just attractive Black people. There was no data, there was no facts, there was no history there. It was just pretty Black men and women. And that's what they thought of AI, of Black people, of Black excellence. I think where we've got to be very intentional, and I'm happy to hear you say that your leadership is in journalism, because we've got to now start to tell our story and make sure that it's being input into AI as it's real, as it's authentic, because it can change the future of how the world sees Black Americans if it's not accurate and authentic. But I also say that there are things that AI can do that are going to be extremely helpful. We talked about how do small businesses, Black-owned businesses, interface and interact with large companies, federal government, federal agencies. And many business owners, particularly Black business owners, know their business extremely well. They do well with their business, but they haven't done very well in reference to how it's presented on paper or through the internet or through Google. They don't have those capabilities. So what we're saying is, hey, let AI create your statements, create your ability to be seen in the internet, in the metaverse. It can take what you say with a very few words and turn that into something that will make you look like you are just a great business owner. I'll give you a great example. On Friday, after the announcement of the Trump trial, I talked to some AI folk, and I was just venting about Black people having to save democracy. And I was on this conversation for about 30, 45 minutes. And they took what I was saying and took those conversations and created an op-ed from it that will now be seen in the Washington Post. It wasn't me having to type out the op-ed or create the story. They took my regular conversation and the concerns that I had about what was happening and created an op-ed out of it using AI. So there's some great tools, some great resources that can be utilized through AI. We've just got to make sure that we're using it to benefit our communities and businesses.
Ron, I tried to be optimistic like you. We were having a conversation about the Trump verdict, guilty on all charges. And there's one side that says, so what? It means nothing. But I don't think that. I think it's the beginning of something. And I just do. My mama said, God rest her soul, God don't like ugly, and care less for beauty, I don't think you can go around doing wrong, treating people mean, and it not come back around. And it hit me yesterday. It hit me like the sun in Africa. If this cat does get elected, it strengthens the argument for returning citizens. 35% of the people in prison look like you and me. In a country with 5% of the world's population, yet 25% of the incarcerated persons. What do you think a Trump what impact might this have on returning citizens, of which we star in that movie? Something to think about, huh?
Yeah, that's a great perspective. I hadn't really given.
They can't say you a convict. Your president won.
Yeah. I think there's some validity to that. My concern is that, I talk to white voters quite often around the country, and they have basically said we're going to overlook this guilty verdict. We're going to overlook all of his bad actions. If you remember, he talked about Hillary Clinton being found guilty and how she shouldn't be able to run for president. And, here it is, as you talk about karma, him going through the same type of issue. My concern is I don't really care about what Trump is or isn't. It ain't about Trump to me. It is really about the guardrails of democracy. I believe that Trump is so indebted to individuals and organizations that if he gets elected, that he'll just be a puppet to billionaires that have loaned him money, that have gotten him out of issues over the last 10 plus years. And now he will be so indebted to many organizations that he'll be forced to make decisions that will be detrimental to this country. And so historically, Black folk have always been there to vote for democracy. And I think in order for democracy to continue, it is going to be, once again, Black people that are going to have to save it. I don't think that a Trump administration will be good for democracy. I think it'll be terrible for the country. I think Biden understands that, and that's why he's got this whole Black tour that he's going around talking to Black voters, because he understands that it was Black voters that got him elected before. That right now he's got to go back to those Black voters to get him reelected, if in fact it happens.
So Ron, I have to share this with you. It came out April 5th. Zimbabwe. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Zimbabwe has introduced a new gold-backed currency called ZIG. The name stands for Zimbabwe Gold. It is the latest attempt to stabilize an economy that has lurched from crisis to crisis for the past 25 years. Any thoughts on either Zimbabwe or the continent of Africa overall? One of my first research papers in grad school had to do with African-American economic cooperation. Leon Sullivan comes to mind. He would have those summits over in Harare, Zimbabwe, God rest his soul. And there have been others who have talked about what some view us as the modern, you mentioned the Bible, modern day Josephs, sold into slavery. That's a part of our history. And what we can do from our perch here in the United States. Any thoughts on business in Africa?
Just last week, the president of Kenya came to Washington, D.C. I had an opportunity to be with the vice president and their president, President Ruto. I also serve on the board for the International Chamber of Commerce, where we have several countries represented there. We have 6 chambers on the continent of Africa, so we get a chance probably twice a year to visit the continent. And the continent is, I believe, the greatest opportunity that Black Americans have. 98% of America's growth is going to come outside of the boundaries of the United States of America, meaning that if we are going to prosper, we are going to have to look outside of the United States for that prosperity. And where else better to do that than the continent of Africa? I think part of the challenge is a lot of Black people have never visited the continent. And so they have this perspective that Africa is still, Tarzan and Jane and living back in prehistoric days. And that's far from the truth. Some of the richest countries in the world are on the continent of Africa. You can't go any further than Qatar and know that it is the #1 country in the world in reference to richness. Part of the challenge, though, is we just got to make sure that we're having the connections. I think a lot of people think, well, I have created this widget here in America, and I'm going to go sell it in Africa because of the population here. And that's the wrong concept. The concept has got to be, hey, I've created this widget. Let me take it to Africa, manufacture it in Africa because of the resources that are there, the labor pool that is there, and then sell it to Americans and to the rest of the world. It was funny. I was in Switzerland last year for a meeting, and they were talking about, hey, this is the best chocolate in America. It's the best chocolate in the world. It's a Swiss chocolate. But they get the chocolate from Africa, So we've got to just make sure that we are telling our own story. And I think once we do that, I think that's where we have the opportunity to really be able to change what's happening, not just on the continent of Africa, but also to Black Americans here.
People would be surprised where Coach bag where they get their leather. I was in Ethiopia, and it's my understanding that those goats in Ethiopia are often sold to places like Italy and other countries.
It's funny because I have a clothing line, so forth, and I get things done in China, but China is buying the products from Africa. Many times they're getting it manufactured in Africa, shipped to China. China's putting their label on it and my label on it and shipping it back to America, where we should just be going directly to Africa. We can cut out, the middleman. In this case, China is the middleman. I just think we've got to make the connections. Africa is looking for us to come back. We've just got to make sure that we're doing it intelligently and where and how it makes sense.
Ron, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule, hanging out with the vice president. So thank you for letting me hang out with you this morning. But I would be so remiss if I didn't put out there that my daughter, she's now in school. A special thank you to Tiffany, also to Mr. Phoenix, J.K. Phoenix, for making sure we got this interview. But my daughter, entrepreneur, 6 years, she's back in college, just had a 3.5 semester. But I certainly wanted you to put a plug in for Mr. Buy Black. You know Mr. Buy Black?
I do, and I was going to say before I left, I was going to have to give a shout out to Buy Black, to your audience, listeners, viewers. If you are looking and you're truly saying, hey, I want to support more conversations like we're hearing here in Washington, hearing on the Doni Glover Show, and you're looking for Black-owned businesses, and you're looking for Black-owned products, go to BYBLACK.US, buyblack.us. You'll see it there on the link. It will give you the opportunity to support Black-owned businesses. Many people have the impression that, well, I can't find one, so it must not exist. You can find businesses and products that are created by Black people. And if you are a business owner, make sure you're onboarding your business at www.byblack.us as well, so that it can be found. There are city pages, so you can go to cities and find out what's going on in their cities in reference to Black culture, Black businesses, as well as just Black media, Black churches, Black banks, to be able to support Black initiatives around the country. And so we're so excited about the future of Buy Black. We're so impressed with what we've seen, the successes that the business owners are now experiencing that are on board on the platform as well. So again, thank you, Doni, for allowing us to be on this morning. Truly an honor, and we're looking forward. The last thing I want to say is to all your listeners, vote. It is going to be extremely important that Black people vote in this election, as well as not just the national, but your local, state. Folk like Angela Alsabrook are going to be important because we can only do as much work as our elected officials are going to support. So again, thank you for allowing us to be on this morning. If you're wanting to find out more information about us, you can also visit our website at www.usblackchambers.org. Thanks again, Doni, for having us.
Ron, you're a godsend. I've bumped into you at the White House. I've bumped into you in Portland, Oregon at the National Newspaper Publishers Association. But all of that happened, of course, thanks to the good Lord, but also Michael Graham. So shout out to Michael Graham.
Yes. Thank you so
for joining
much.
us.
Lastly, our national conference is July 17th through the 20th. Michael Grant will be with us. He will be kind of giving a historical perspective of the last 15 years of what the National Bankers Association, the Black-owned banks, have done with the U.S. Black Chamber to ensure that we have a good economic agenda. You can find us. We'll be at the Waldorf Astoria in Washington, D.C. That Tuesday we'll be going on Capitol Hill. Wednesday, Thursday, we have great conversations, and then Friday we'll be at the White House. Appreciate the opportunity, man, to be able to talk to your listeners and viewers. Again, man, you're like a little brother to me, man, that I didn't have, but I consider you to be one of them.
Always. Thank you very much, big brother.
Thank you.
Good morning, world.